in the spirit of getting as much out of this as we possibly can, I'm going to start even before Maria has to sit down. Just a quick introduction. My name is Shannon Lehman. I'm the director just for this Portal to the Wheel track, and we hope that you enjoy the programming that we're providing for the whole con, but also for this room specifically for the whole weekend. And this is actually one of the panels that I've been most excited about. Actually, this was the one that when I got the job, this was the first thing I planned that I wanted to do, because I feel like it's long overdue. And this is our, not trying to be insultingly named, it's not the Renaissance stupid panel. The intent is, I think it's really easy for a lot of people as they're reading the books when they don't have a lot of historical knowledge or frame of references for the myriad of cultural influences that both Robert Jordan and now Brandon draw upon for these books, to just kind of place this in your head as English Renaissance and Elizabethan and be done with it. But I think that if you're here, then you probably care enough to realize that that's not the case most of the time, almost all. So what we've done, we've got a panel of experts. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a second, but that are going to help us to learn more about the cultural, historical, geographical, whatever influences that have gone into so many of the different areas of Randland and the world of Wheel of Time. So what I'd like to start off with is we're going to have each of the panelists introduce them, and then to themselves, and to get started, to tell us about if they have a favorite cultural influencer area that you really enjoy either reading about or researching, and just kind of if there's one area you'd like to highlight and make sure that we don't forget to talk about in the next hour. Okay, so we'll start with Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Simmons. I was Robert Jordan's assistant for many years, and I'm still working with Harriet and Brandon and Alan here to finish the Wheel of Time.
Yes, and we're going to talk about the encyclopedia, which we're calling the Codex, later in the weekend. Is there one area that you love?
There's so much I love, but I really do love Brandon's school that he starts. And Linda did a fabulous article on 13th Depository that, I learned so much. It was really great. But I just love, Beryl Park. She's got this thing she calls, what does she call it, a glider? And she jumps off cliffs, and she's got a broken arm at some point. That's fun.
Yeah.
It's not exactly cultural influence, but
Well, and I mean that's a good point too. And one of the areas, that we're going to talk about is kind of where you would place the world or parts of the world potentially within the development of our world. So if you have this frame of reference from Mistborn, we know that they have canning. We haven't seen canning in Wheel of Time, and so kind of what the timing influences that they've come through. So that's and the school is the example of the technology that's being developed. Sorry,
Alan Romanchik, also, I've worked since I guess 2001, Bandersnatch with Jim Rigney and Maria and Harriet. What was the question?
If you have one area that you specifically love to research or work on.
Yeah, being interested in architecture anyway, is kind of fascinated with the different structures found throughout Randland, and particularly the ogre architecture. And I did a little research on that and came to some conclusions.
I'm Rachel Little. I'm a fangirl who's in the right place at the right time. I enjoy costuming. I'm half of Hair and Scissors, and I enjoy right now. I enjoy placing cultures with their historical counterparts, like the Kyrian. Otherwise, my crowning achievement was realizing that there was loom technology in Randland.
So I'm Aubrey Pham. I'm the director of programming for JordanCon. I've been helping out with the Wheel of Time track at JordanCon for a number of years now. My biggest area that I enjoy doing as far as costuming is specifically embellishments and embroidery, and the little things that make I like the cultural influences and all that. Sort of stuff.
Okay, I'm Linda Taglieri, and I'm the co-author of the 13th Depository Blogspot, and I've written a lot of articles on the different real-world influences. I started at Whatmania. I think my first article appeared in 2004 there, and I ran the fact there for up until it closed, basically, last year. Or a bit before that, because when I knew it was closing, I left to do my own stuff. And I'm gradually reposting everything I had there on this new site with pictures, which is kind of nice, and links and all the other mod cons that we never had. So it's been good. And do I have a favourite world influence? I have written for so many. And even though I am an embroiderer and have done some Wheel of Time embroideries, that might not be my favourite thing, because I have my own embroidery, my real embroidery. Probably, it's, I guess, perhaps the non-European influences, and also perhaps the influences that went to make it Forsaken. And the Shadow.
Those are mythological.
Well, yes, I love all that. I've written hugely on that.
So we do absolutely want to give the opportunity to do Q&A, and I think that that's going to generate a lot of discussion and potentially derail and any of the topics that we want to make sure we cover. And I know that a lot of the panelists have done some specific research to prepare for this discussion, and I want to give them the opportunity first to share that knowledge. And so, Alan, I know that you talked specifically about the architecture. Can you share some of the influences that went into the different areas of the books?
Yeah, totally speculative, of course, because I don't think Jim had anything specific in his notes about it. But yeah, I fixated on the ogre architecture because while pretty much everything else in the books was familiar, the organic forms that they produced really fascinated me, and tried to picture it in mind. And I remembered a book someone showed me 15, 20 years ago, maybe, that was done by somebody who had some connection with rock stars and was an artist. And it had to do with ferrocement. I don't know if you know ferrocement construction, but they actually make ships out of it, homes, swimming pools. You form a mesh with rebar and chicken wire, basically, and with a gunite gun or a lot of labor, you press in concrete on both sides. And you can make a fairly thin hull if it's a ship or wall of a house. But the great thing about it is you're not really restricted to squares, rectangles, sharp corners. Everything can be very smooth and wavy. So the ogre architecture, with the construction that they did, seemed very, very similar to this. So I looked back, and the fellow who pioneered a lot of this was an artist who actually did art for rock band covers in the 60s and 70s, Roger Dean, who was a Brit. And he also had this fascination with what's become known as bioorganic architecture. And produced, with his brother Martin, they put out a book of their fantasy homes and public buildings, which are fantastic. I mean, it really was a lot like what the owners supposedly did. And their work, very little of it which actually came to fruition in actual housing. A lot of other architects and designers picked up after that, and there's some phenomenal things out there. But I should bring up one more guy. A century before, there was a postman in southern France named Ferdinand Cheval, who was a little eccentric, and for 33 years on his route, he would pick up odd-shaped stones off the ground and bring them home with him. He eventually had so much, he started construction on a palace. And in 40 years' time, he had constructed this fantastic organic structure out of concrete with all of these rocks that he had collected stuck in. And there are pictures of it around. It's called the Ideal Palace. The man's name is Chagall, and it's absolutely fascinating. And actually, he's considered the major proponent of dream architecture. But again, it's very ogre-like in the way it's constructed. You know, the rest of it, I don't know a whole lot. I mean, you know, Jim drew on influences of structures from all over the world. The ones where there's a lot of rock and maybe not a lot of wood, they would have the stone construction, and you know, as one would expect. The areas with a lot of snow would have very steep roofs. And, you know, so he was very conventional in that regard. I think that's about it. Anyone has any questions? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Maria, I know that I think that you were looking back specifically on the school and the technology that they had there. Would you like to talk about that, or was there another area that you?
Okay. What I was trying to find most was where the costumes came from. What Jim was actually looking at when he came up with the Irregardari dress. And I found nothing really.
Okay.
One thing that I've always found really fascinating that makes that world different from our world is that they have a printing press. And yeah, the new school, they're making the printing press better. But they had a printing press. They really had work. You know, they could convey knowledge more easily than the Renaissance onward until Gutenberg popped up. And it probably is at a point where it's well beyond Gutenberg in our world. And so that makes so many things different for them. And I really don't.
That's fine. And then, Linda, as far as like the school or the different areas that you researched,
I've done the costume, but I haven't put all of that on the blog yet.
As far as like the non-European influences, can you talk to some of those?
All right. Well, I'll go with a different country. Take Shara. That's both African, and their appearance is described as the tight, wiry hair, and they use slaves a lot. But it's also Chinese in the way they've cut themselves off, and they have like literally barriers around, and they have just the ports that people are allowed to go to and no others. That's so typical of how imperial China was. And I guess they've got reverse concubines, you might say, where the rulers have the female channelers have the males as treated like almost like concubines, but worse really. So there is that sort of influence. And actually, there was one Sharon that turned up in Tyre, and he was wearing a Mandarin collar. So yeah, and they have the silk, of course. So yeah, that's one. Okay, and then there's Shongchan, which is very interesting. It's both Japanese influenced and Chinese influenced. It's got, the way Tuon is, she's kind of got a feel of the end of like she's the last emperor, if you like, of that particular type, I think, in China. But also there's the end of how the Japanese Empire changed at the end of World War II or during World War II. Or there's always that last feel as though after Tuon or during Tuon's reign, it's going to be very, or for Tuana as she is now, it's going to be different. It cannot be the traditional sort of thing. It has definitely got that feel to it, yes. And there's a lot of Chinese and Japanese sort of influences, including the clothing, again, the cut of the men's clothing in particular. And they've got, the women's dresses have got the tiny pleats. That's kind of shibori-like, because like when shibori's done, it's